The morning sickness hit me like a freight train at exactly 6:47 a.m., just as I was trying to prepare breakfast for Marcus and get ready for my shift at the pediatric clinic. My hands trembled as I gripped the kitchen counter, fighting back the familiar wave of nausea that had become my unwelcome companion for the past 3 weeks. "Marcus!" I called out weakly, my voice barely carrying over the sound of his video game from the living room. The autumn rain pelted against our Seattle apartment windows, creating a gray backdrop that matched my exhaustion. "Could you help me with breakfast? I'm feeling really sick again." The controller clattered onto the coffee table with an irritated thud. "Emma, seriously? We've talked about this." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his sandy hair disheveled, wearing the same wrinkled t-shirt from yesterday. His blue eyes, which used to look at me with such tenderness, now held nothing but annoyance. "Pregnancy isn't an excuse to be lazy. My mom worked 2 jobs when she was pregnant with me." The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. I stared at him, my hand instinctively moving to my still flat belly where our child was growing. The smell of the half-cooked eggs made my stomach lurch again, and I had to grip the counter tighter to keep from falling. "I'm not being lazy, Marcus. I'm 7 weeks pregnant and working 12-hour shifts at the clinic. I just asked for help making breakfast." My voice cracked slightly, betraying the exhaustion that went bone deep. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and my scrubs from yesterday's shift still smelled faintly of antiseptic. He rolled his eyes, a gesture that had become as familiar as it was painful. "Look, I get that you're tired, but I can't be expected to pick up all the slack just because you're pregnant. Women have been having babies for thousands of years without needing to be waited on hand and foot." The casual cruelty in his voice made something inside me fracture. This wasn't the man I had fallen in love with 3 years ago, the one who used to bring me coffee in bed and tell me I was the strongest person he knew. This stranger wearing my boyfriend's face had been emerging gradually over the past few months, each cutting remark chipping away at who he used to be. I turned back to the stove, my hand shaking as I tried to finish the eggs. The kitchen felt smaller somehow, the walls pressing in as Marcus's words echoed in my head. Outside, Seattle's notorious drizzle painted everything in shades of gray, matching the growing darkness in my relationship. "I have to work a double shift today," I said quietly, not trusting myself to look at him. "Helena called in sick, so I'm covering the evening shift too. I probably won't be home until after midnight." "Great, so I'll have to fend for myself for dinner too." The sarcasm in his voice was thick enough to cut. "Maybe you should have thought about that before getting pregnant." The egg spatula slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor. Those words, "before getting pregnant," as if this was something I'd done alone, some selfish decision I'd made without him. As if he hadn't been there that night 6 weeks ago when we'd both gotten carried away, when promises of "we'll figure it out" had seemed so easy in the darkness of our bedroom. I bent to pick up the spatula, and the movement sent another wave of nausea through me. My vision blurred slightly, and I had to brace myself against the cabinet. The pregnancy symptoms were getting worse, not better, and Dr. Martinez at the clinic had mentioned that some women experienced more severe morning sickness, especially with the added stress of long work hours. "Are you being dramatic again?" Marcus's voice came from directly behind me now, and I could feel his frustration radiating like heat. I straightened slowly, turning to face him. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm exhausted, I'm sick, and I'm scared. This baby is yours too, Marcus. I thought we were in this together." For a moment, something flickered across his face, a shadow of the man I'd once known. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that familiar mask of irritation and selfishness that had become his default expression. "Look, Emma, I didn't sign up to be a nursemaid. If you can't handle being pregnant and working, maybe you should quit your job." He shrugged as if my career, which I'd worked years to build, was as disposable as yesterday's newspaper. The suggestion hit me like ice water. Quit my job? Give up my independence, my purpose, everything I'd worked for since graduating nursing school. The pediatric clinic wasn't just where I worked. It was where I'd found my calling, helping children and their families through their most vulnerable moments. I can't quit my job, Marcus. We need the money, especially now with the baby coming. And I love what I do. My voice was barely above a whisper, but each word carried the weight of years of sacrifice and dedication. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Right, because taking care of sick kids all day isn't enough for you. Now you want me to take care of you too. That's when it happened. The moment when 3 years of love, hope, and shared dreams crumbled into dust. I looked at this man, this stranger, and realized that somewhere along the way, I'd lost not just his support, but his basic human decency. The Marcus I'd fallen in love with would never have spoken to anyone this way, let alone the woman carrying his child. I turned off the stove with trembling fingers, the eggs now cold and congealed in the pan. The apartment felt suffocating, filled with words that couldn't be taken back and a silence that stretched between us like a chasm. I need to get ready for work, I said finally, my voice steady despite the chaos in my heart. As I walked past him toward our bedroom, Marcus grabbed my arm, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop me. Emma, don't be like this. I'm just saying you need to toughen up. Pregnancy isn't a disability. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. In his eyes I saw no love, no concern, no recognition of the woman who'd supported him through 2 job losses, who'd held him when his father died, who'd believed in him when no one else would. Let go of me, I said quietly. He released my arm immediately, perhaps surprised by the steel in my voice. I continued to the bedroom, closing the door behind me with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything we'd built together. As I sat on the edge of our bed, still wearing yesterday's scrubs, I placed both hands on my belly and made a silent promise to the tiny life growing inside me. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't let my child grow up watching their mother be treated like this. I wouldn't let them think this was what love looked like. The rain continued to fall against the windows, washing the world clean outside while inside. I began to realize that some things, once broken, can never be repaired. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't always a bad thing. 3 days later, I was running on fumes and pure determination. The double shifts had become routine, partly because Helena was still recovering from the flu, but mostly because going home meant facing Marcus and his increasingly cold indifference. The pediatric clinic had become my sanctuary, where crying children and worried parents reminded me that there were still people in the world who cared about each other. It was Thursday evening, nearly 9 p.m., when Dr. Martinez found me reorganizing the supply closet for the 3rd time that week. The familiar ache in my lower back had intensified over the past few hours, and the fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unforgiving. Emma, you should have gone home hours ago. Her voice carried the gentle authority that made her such an excellent pediatrician. Dr. Sarah Martinez was in her 50s, with kind brown eyes and silver-streaked hair that she always wore in a practical bun. When's the last time you took a real break? I couldn't remember. The days had blurred together into an endless cycle of patient care, paperwork, and avoiding the growing tension at home. I'm fine, Dr. Martinez. Just trying to stay busy. She studied my face with the same careful attention she gave her young patients. How are things at home? With the pregnancy, I mean. The question hung in the air between us, loaded with the weight of everything I wasn't saying. Dr. Martinez had been my mentor since I started at the clinic 2 years ago, and she had a way of seeing through the professional mask I wore so carefully. Marcus is adjusting, I said finally, which was true in the most generous interpretation possible. And how are you adjusting? Her question was gentle but pointed. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus, where's dinner? I'm starving and there's nothing in the fridge. I stared at the message, feeling that familiar knot form in my stomach. It was past 9 p.m. I'd been working since 6 a.m., covering for Helena's patients as well as my own, and he was texting me about dinner as if I were his personal catering service. I should probably head home, I said, pocketing my phone without responding to the text. Dr. Martinez nodded, but her expression remained concerned. Emma, I want you to know that if you ever need to talk, my door is always open. Pregnancy can be challenging under the best circumstances, and having a strong support system is crucial. The kindness in her voice almost undid me. I nodded quickly, not trusting myself to speak, and gathered my things. The October evening was crisp and clear, a welcome change from the endless rain we'd had earlier in the week. Seattle's skyline glittered against the dark sky as I drove home through streets that felt increasingly unfamiliar. Our apartment building looked different, somehow shabbier, more worn down. Or maybe I was just seeing it with new eyes, imagining what it would be like to bring a baby home to this place, to raise a child in the tension that had become our normal. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs slowly, my body heavy with exhaustion and dread. Each step felt like walking toward an inevitable confrontation, and I found myself pausing outside our door, key in hand, gathering the courage to face whatever mood Marcus would be in tonight. The apartment was dark, except for the glow of the television. Marcus was sprawled on the couch, surrounded by empty beer bottles and takeout containers from the Thai place down the street. The familiar seen him comfortable and fed while I dragged myself home after a 14-hour shift sparked something hot and dangerous in my chest. "There you are," he said without looking away from the screen. "I was starting to think you'd moved into that clinic permanently. I texted you that I was working late." I set my purse down carefully, trying to keep my voice neutral. "And I see you managed to figure out dinner." "Yeah, well, I couldn't wait forever." He finally looked at me, and I saw the sullen expression that had become his default whenever I walked through the door. Some of us don't have the luxury of hiding at work all day. The accusation hit me like a slap. Hiding at work? I was working myself to exhaustion, partly to cover for a sick colleague, partly to save money for the baby we'd be bringing into this world in 7 months, and partly because coming home had become something to endure rather than enjoy. "I'm not hiding, Marcus. I'm working. You know, that thing people do to pay rent and buy groceries." The sarcasm slipped out before I could stop it, sharper than I'd intended. His eyes narrowed. "Don't get smart with me, Emma. I'm tired of this attitude." What attitude? Being tired after working a 14-hour shift? Being pregnant and exhausted and wanting just a little bit of support from my boyfriend? My voice was rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "There you go again with the pregnancy card." Marcus stood up abruptly, towering over me in the small living room. "Every conversation, every argument, it all comes back to you being pregnant, like it's some kind of free pass to be a bitch." The word hung in the air between us like poison. I stared at him, this man who'd once told me I was the love of his life, who'd talked about our future together with such hope and excitement. When had he started looking at me like I was his enemy? "Don't call me that," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "Then don't act like it." He moved closer, and I caught the smell of beer on his breath. "I'm sick of walking on eggshells around you. Sick of everything being about what you need, what you want, how tired you are." Something was building in my chest, a pressure that felt dangerous and necessary all at once. What I want? "Marcus, when have I ever asked you for anything unreasonable? I asked you to help with breakfast 3 days ago, and you acted like I was asking you to climb Mount Everest. Here we go again." He rolled his eyes, a gesture that had lost any hint of playfulness and become purely cruel. Poor Emma, working so hard, suffering so much. "Do you want a medal?" "I want a partner." The words came out louder than I'd intended, carrying the weight of months of swallowed frustration and growing loneliness. "I want the man I fell in love with, who used to care about me, who used to what? Treat you like a princess?" News flash. Emma, real life isn't a fairy tale. People have responsibilities, and sometimes that means you don't get to be coddled every second of every day. I felt the fight drain out of me as suddenly as it had risen. This wasn't going anywhere. These arguments never went anywhere anymore because Marcus had already decided that I was the problem, that my pregnancy was an inconvenience, that my needs were unreasonable demands. "I'm going to take a shower," I said, turning toward the hallway. "Great. Run away again. That's your solution to everything these days." I stopped in the doorway, my back still to him. "I'm not running away, Marcus. I'm trying to avoid saying something we'll both regret." "Like what? What could you possibly say that would make this worse?" I turned back to face him, and for a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes, maybe fear, maybe recognition of how far we'd drifted from each other. But then his expression hardened again, and I realized that whatever had just passed between us was probably the last echo of who we used to be together. "Like the fact that I don't recognize you anymore," I said quietly. "Like the fact that I'm starting to wonder if I ever really knew you at all." His face went pale, then flushed red. "Maybe the problem isn't that I've changed, Emma. Maybe the problem is that you never really saw me clearly in the first place." With that, he grabbed his jacket and keys from the coffee table. "I'm going out. Don't wait up." The front door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows, leaving me alone in the sudden silence. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the echo of his footsteps fade down the stairwell, before making my way to the bathroom. The shower was supposed to be a refuge, but as the hot water cascaded over my exhausted body, I found myself sliding down the tiled wall until I was sitting on the floor, my knees drawn up to my chest as much as my changing body would allow. That's when it hit me, not just the exhaustion or the loneliness, but the terrifying realization that this was my life now. This apartment, this man, this endless cycle of conflict and coldness. In 7 months, I would bring a baby into this chaos, and my child would grow up watching their parents tear each other apart with words that cut deeper than any physical wound. I pressed my forehead against my knees and let myself cry for the first time in weeks, not the frustrated tears that had threatened during our arguments, but deep, soul-wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere I'd been trying to protect. I cried for the Marcus I'd lost, for the future we'd planned together, for the little life growing inside me who deserved so much better than what we were becoming. The water began to run cold, but I didn't move. Outside, Seattle's night sounds filtered through the small bathroom window, distant traffic, the hum of the building's heating system, the muffled sound of a television from the apartment upstairs. Normal sounds of normal people living normal lives, while mine fell apart one cruel word at a time. When I finally stood up, my legs were stiff and my fingertips were wrinkled. I dried off mechanically, wrapped myself in the terry cloth robe Marcus had given me last Christmas, and walked to our bedroom. He still wasn't back, and part of me hoped he wouldn't be back until morning. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and listening for the sound of his key in the lock, I placed my hand on my belly and whispered the same promise I'd made 3 days ago. This little person would not grow up thinking this was what love looked like. Whatever it took, whatever sacrifices I had to make, my child would know they deserved better. I just had to figure out how to give it to them. The cramping started during my lunch break on Friday, sharp and low in my abdomen, different from the usual pregnancy discomfort I'd grown accustomed to. I was sitting in the clinic's small break room, forcing down a peanut butter sandwich despite my queasy stomach when the first wave hit. Dr. Martinez found me 20 minutes later, bent over in the supply closet, gripping a shelf for support as another cramp rolled through my lower back and pelvis. "Emma." Her voice was sharp with concern. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," I gasped, trying to breathe through the pain. "It started about half an hour ago. It's probably nothing, just normal pregnancy stuff, right?" But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't normal. The cramping was too intense, too rhythmic, and there was a pressure building that made me feel like something was terribly wrong. Dr. Martinez was already moving, her medical training taking over. Come on, let's get you to examination room 3. Can you walk? I nodded, though each step sent fresh waves of pain through my core. The short walk down the hallway felt like miles, and by the time we reached the examination room, I was breathing hard and fighting back tears. Lie down, Dr. Martinez instructed, her voice calm but urgent. When was your last ultrasound? 6 weeks ago. Everything was fine. My voice sounded small and scared, even to my own ears. The baby was healthy, strong heartbeat. She was already pulling on gloves, reaching for the portable ultrasound machine. I'm going to take a look, okay? Try to relax. Relax. As if that were possible with fear clawing at my throat and my body betraying me in ways I didn't understand. The ultrasound gel was cold against my skin, and the familiar sound of the machine humming to life filled the small room. For a moment, there was only the sound of Dr. Martinez moving the probe across my belly, her eyes focused intently on the screen. Then I heard it, the rapid, strong whoosh, whoosh, whoosh of my baby's heartbeat, and I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. The baby looks good, Dr. Martinez said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. Strong heartbeat, good positioning, but you're showing signs of stress-related cramping, and your blood pressure is elevated. Stress-related. I tried to sit up, but another cramp forced me back down. Emma, when's the last time you had a full night's sleep? When's the last time you ate a proper meal or took a day off? Her questions were gentle but pointed, cutting through my defenses like a scalpel. I couldn't answer because the truth was too embarrassing to say out loud. I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept well, because going to bed meant lying next to Marcus, feeling the distance between us like a physical wall. I couldn't remember the last proper meal because cooking had become another battleground, another opportunity for him to remind me that I was failing somehow. I'm fine, I said automatically, the lie so practiced it felt almost believable. Dr. Martinez set down the ultrasound probe and looked at me with the same expression she used when talking to parents whose children were sicker than they wanted to admit. Emma, you're not fine. Your body is telling you that something needs to change, and you need to listen to it. For your sake and for the baby's. Another cramp, stronger this time, cut off whatever excuse I might have offered. I curled onto my side, pressing my face into the thin pillow, and tried to breathe through the pain. I'm going to give you something for the cramping, and I want you to go home and rest. No arguments. Dr. Martinez was already reaching for her prescription pad. And Emma, I think you should consider whether your current living situation is contributing to your stress levels. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. She knew. Somehow, she'd seen through my careful facade and recognized the signs I thought I'd been hiding so well. I can't just leave work, I protested weakly. Helen is still out, and we're short-staffed. The clinic will survive without you for one afternoon. You won't survive if you keep pushing yourself like this. Her voice was firm but kind. Go home, Emma. Rest. And think about what I said. An hour later, I was standing outside our apartment building, Dr. Martinez's words echoing in my head. The medication had dulled the cramping, but the deeper ache, the one that had nothing to do with pregnancy and everything to do with the slow dissolution of my life, remained. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavy with dread. It was only 2 p.m., and Marcus would be surprised to see me home so early. I wasn't ready to explain what had happened. Wasn't ready to deal with his inevitable dismissal of my concerns or his suggestion that I was being dramatic again. The apartment was quiet when I opened the door, and for a moment I thought Marcus might be out. Then I heard voices from the bedroom, his voice, and another voice I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, light and laughing. My blood went cold. I stood frozen in the entryway, listening to the murmur of conversation punctuated by occasional laughter. The rational part of my mind tried to find innocent explanations. Maybe it was his cousin visiting, maybe someone from work, maybe the television was on. But my heart knew better. There was an intimacy in the tone, a familiarity that made my stomach drop even as my logical mind tried to deny what I was hearing. I moved toward the bedroom on silent feet, each step confirming what I already knew but didn't want to believe. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap I could see Marcus sitting on our bed next to a petite blonde woman I'd never seen before. They weren't doing anything overtly inappropriate. She was fully clothed, sitting cross-legged facing him while he leaned back against the headboard. But there was something in their body language, in the way she touched his arm when she laughed, in the way he looked at her like she was fascinating and funny and everything I apparently wasn't anymore. "She's been so moody lately," Marcus was saying, and I realized with a sick jolt that he was talking about me. "Everything's about the pregnancy, you know? Like I'm supposed to drop everything and cater to her every whim." The woman made a sympathetic noise. "That sounds really hard for you. I mean, pregnancy doesn't have to change everything, right? Lots of women work and stay active without making it everyone else's problem." Her words, so similar to what Marcus had been saying to me for weeks, felt like a knife between my ribs. Here was validation for every cruel thing he'd said, confirmation from a stranger that I was indeed being unreasonable, demanding, difficult. "Exactly," Marcus said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "It's like she expects me to read her mind and anticipate her every need. I never signed up to be a nursemaid." Those words again, the same ones he'd thrown at me 3 days ago, now being shared with this woman like a confidence, like a secret between them. I should have confronted them. I should have walked into that room and demanded explanations, should have fought for my relationship and my dignity. Instead, I backed away from the door as quietly as I'd approached, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they would hear it. The cramping started again as I made my way to the bathroom, locking the door behind me with trembling fingers. But this wasn't the same as earlier. This was different, sharper, accompanied by a pulling sensation that made me double over. I sank to the bathroom floor, my back against the tub, and tried to breathe through the pain. But it wasn't just physical anymore. The cramping in my abdomen was nothing compared to the crushing weight in my chest as I processed what I'd just witnessed. Marcus had moved on. Maybe not physically yet, but emotionally, he was already sharing his grievances with another woman, already seeking comfort and validation from someone who would tell him what he wanted to hear. Someone who would agree that I was the problem, that pregnancy wasn't an excuse for needing support, that he was the victim in this relationship. Another cramp, stronger this time, and I had to press my face against my knees to keep from crying out. The baby. I had to think about the baby, had to stay calm for the tiny life depending on me. But as I sat there on the cold bathroom tiles, listening to the muffled sound of Marcus and his visitor in the next room, I realized that staying calm wasn't an option anymore. This wasn't just about me and my feelings. This was about my child's future, about the kind of home and family they would be born into. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I'd saved months ago but never thought I'd actually use. Helena had given it to me after her own messy divorce, insisting that every woman should have a good lawyer's number just in case. Just in case had arrived. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Peterson Family Law. This is Attorney Jennifer Peterson." "Ms. Peterson? My name is Emma Rodriguez. I was referred by Helena Walsh. I think I need help." "What kind of help are you looking for, Emma?" Her voice was kind but businesslike, and I could hear the sound of papers shuffling in the background. I looked around the bathroom, at the towels I'd washed and folded countless times, at the medicine cabinet filled with our shared toiletries, at the small framed photo of Marcus and me from last Christmas when we'd still been happy, or when I'd still believed we were happy. "I'm pregnant," I said quietly, "and I think my relationship is over. I need to know what my options are." "I see. Are you in immediate danger, Emma?" "No, not physical danger. But—" I paused, trying to find words for the way my spirit was slowly being crushed, the way each day felt like another small death. "I'm sitting on my bathroom floor because I can't face going into my own bedroom. There's another woman there with my boyfriend, and they're talking about how unreasonable and demanding I am because I'm pregnant with his child. The silence on the other end stretched for a moment before Ms. Peterson spoke again, her voice warmer now. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Can you come in to see me next week? I think we need to talk about your options face to face. Yes, I said, and felt something shift inside me, not hope exactly, but something stronger. Determination, maybe. I'll be there. After I hung up, I sat on the bathroom floor for a long time, listening to the continued murmur of voices from the bedroom. The cramping had subsided, but the clarity that had replaced it was almost painful in its intensity. I was done. Done pretending this relationship could be saved. Done accepting crumbs of affection and calling it love. Done believing that I somehow deserved to be treated like an inconvenience in my own life. My child deserved better. And maybe, just maybe, so did I. When I finally stood up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, I saw something I hadn't seen in months. A woman who was ready to fight. Not for Marcus, not for us, but for the life growing inside me and the future we both deserved. The woman in the bedroom could have him. I was done competing for someone who'd already decided I wasn't worth his respect or love. It was time to build something better from the ground up. The following Tuesday, I sat in Jennifer Peterson's law office, surrounded by diplomas and family photos that spoke of stability and success. She was younger than I had expected, maybe early 40s, with short auburn hair and intelligent gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Tell me about your financial situation," she said, pen poised over yellow legal pad. "Do you have separate bank accounts? Joint assets? What about your living arrangement?" I'd been dreading these questions, partly because they forced me to confront how financially intertwined Marcus and I had become, and partly because they highlighted just how unprepared I was for single motherhood. "We have a joint checking account, and both our names are on the lease," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I make more money than he does, quite a bit more, actually. The apartment, the furniture, most of our belongings, I paid for almost everything." Jennifer made notes, nodding occasionally. "What about the pregnancy? Has he acknowledged paternity?" "He knows the baby is his. We were together when I conceived, and there's no question about timing." I paused, remembering his reaction when I'd first told him about the pregnancy. He was excited at first, or at least he seemed to be, but things changed pretty quickly. How so? The question opened floodgates I'd been trying to keep closed. I told her about the gradual shift in Marcus's behavior, the increasing coldness and criticism, the way he'd started treating my pregnancy like a personal inconvenience rather than something we were experiencing together. "And last Friday," I continued, my voice getting stronger as I spoke, "I came home early from work because I was having complications, stress-related cramping that my doctor was concerned about. I found another woman in our bedroom." Jennifer's pen stopped moving. "Were they?" "Not physically intimate, as far as I could tell, but emotionally, absolutely. She was agreeing with him about how unreasonable I am, how pregnancy isn't an excuse for needing support. It was like walking in on him having an affair with my replacement. I'm sorry, Emma. That must have been incredibly painful." Jennifer's voice was gentle but professional. "Have you confronted him about this?" I shook my head. "I haven't been home since Friday. I've been staying with a friend from work. Marcus has been texting me, asking where I am, but I haven't responded. I don't know what to say to him. What do you want to happen here? Are you looking to salvage the relationship, or are you ready to move forward independently?" The question shouldn't have been difficult to answer, but speaking the words out loud felt like crossing a bridge I could never uncross. I want out. I want to raise my child in a home filled with love and respect, not constant criticism and coldness. I paused, surprised by the strength in my own voice. "I want to be happy again." Jennifer smiled, and for the first time since entering her office, I felt like someone was truly on my side. "Then let's talk about how to make that happen." Over the next hour, She outlined my options with a clarity that was both reassuring and overwhelming. Since we weren't married, the process would be simpler in some ways but more complicated in others. We'd need to establish paternity legally, work out custody arrangements, and determine child support. The apartment lease was trickier since both our names were on it, but since I'd paid most of the deposits and fees, I had a strong case for staying if I wanted to. What about his parental rights? I asked the question I'd been dreading most. He'll have rights as a father, assuming he wants to exercise them. But Emma, those rights come with responsibilities too. If he wants to be part of this child's life, he'll need to step up financially and emotionally. You don't have to accept minimal effort just because he's the biological father. By the time I left Jennifer's office, I had a clear plan of action and, more importantly, a sense of hope I hadn't felt in months. The afternoon sun felt warmer on my face as I walked to my car, and for the first time in weeks, I found myself thinking about the future with something other than dread. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. Emma, this is ridiculous. Come home so we can talk like adults. Like adults. As if I were the one who'd been behaving childishly. As if I were the one who'd brought another woman into our bedroom to validate complaints about my pregnancy. Instead of responding to Marcus, I called Helena, who'd been letting me stay in her guest room since Friday night. How did it go? She asked immediately. Better than I expected. I think I'm really going to do this, Helena. I'm going to leave him. There was a pause, then Helena's voice, warm with pride and relief. Good for you, honey. You deserve so much better than what he's been giving you. That evening, while Helena was at her book club, I sat in her living room with my laptop and began the process of building a new life. I researched apartments in my price range, calculated budgets for single parenthood, and looked into daycare options near the clinic. Each practical step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd forgotten existed. My phone rang around 8 p.m. Marcus. I stared at his name on the screen, my finger hovering over the decline button. But something Jennifer had said echoed in my mind. You need to control the narrative of the separation. I answered on the fourth ring. Emma, thank God. Where the hell are you? I've been worried sick. The concern in his voice might have fooled me a week ago, but now I could hear the underlying irritation, the barely controlled anger that I dared to disappear without explanation. I'm somewhere safe, I said calmly. We need to talk, Marcus, but not over the phone. Then come home. We can work this out, whatever's going on with you. I know you've been stressed, but running away isn't going to solve anything. Running away, as if protecting myself and my baby from his emotional cruelty was some kind of childish tantrum. As if I hadn't spent months trying to work things out while he systematically dismantled my self-worth. I'm not running away, Marcus. I'm making a choice. We can meet tomorrow at the coffee shop on Pine Street. 2:00. Emma, this is crazy. Just come home and we'll... 2:00, Marcus. Pine Street Coffee. If you want to talk, that's where I'll be. I hung up before he could respond, my heart racing, but my hand steady. This was it, the moment I stopped being a victim of circumstances and started being the author of my own story. The next afternoon, I arrived at Pine Street Coffee 15 minutes early, choosing a table in the back corner where we could have privacy, but I could also see everyone coming and going. I ordered decaf and a blueberry muffin, trying to eat regularly now that my morning sickness had finally started to subside. Marcus walked in exactly on time, looking haggard and confused. His hair was unkempt, and he was wearing the same t-shirt I'd seen him in 3 days in a row before I left. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old tenderness. This was the man I'd loved. After all, the one who'd held me during thunderstorms and brought me soup when I was sick. But then he sat down across from me, and the first words out of his mouth reminded me why I was here. This is all very dramatic, Emma. Couldn't we have had this conversation at home, like normal people? Normal people. As if there had been anything normal about our relationship in months. Marcus, I need you to listen to me carefully because I'm only going to say this once. My voice was calmer than I felt, steady in a way that surprised us both. I'm leaving. This relationship is over. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, then anger. You can't be serious. You're pregnant with my child, Emma. You can't just decide to leave because you're having mood swings. This isn't about mood swings, and you know it. I leaned forward slightly, meeting his eyes directly. This is about the fact that you've spent the past 2 months treating me like an inconvenience. It's about you calling me lazy for asking for help when I was sick. It's about— Oh, here we go again. Marcus rolled his eyes, the gesture that had become like nails on a chalkboard. Everything's my fault, right? Poor Emma, such a victim. It's about finding another woman in our bedroom, Marcus. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? Friday afternoon. I came home early because I was having complications with the pregnancy. You were in our bedroom with a blonde woman, talking about how unreasonable and demanding I am. My voice remained steady, but I could feel the hurt beneath the calm exterior. She was agreeing with you, by the way, telling you how pregnancy doesn't have to change everything, how lots of women don't make it everyone else's problem. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, looking like a fish gasping for air. Emma, that was nothing. That was just she's a friend from work. We were just talking. You were talking about me, about our relationship, about our baby. I placed my hand protectively over my belly, a gesture that had become instinctive. You were sharing our private business with a stranger who was validating every cruel thing you've said to me. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Marcus? Explain to me how bringing another woman into our bedroom to complain about your pregnant girlfriend was innocent. He ran his hands through his hair, and for a moment I saw something that might have been shame flicker across his features. Look, I've been struggling, okay? This whole pregnancy thing, it's been harder than I expected. I needed someone to talk to. You had someone to talk to, me. But instead of working through your feelings with your partner, you found someone who would tell you that I was the problem. I took a sip of my coffee, using the moment to gather my thoughts. Marcus, do you even want this baby? The question hung between us like a challenge. I watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of the excitement he'd shown when I first told him about the pregnancy, any indication that he still wanted the family we'd talked about building together. Of course, I want the baby, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I didn't expect it to be like this. I thought you'd still be, you know? I thought we'd still be us. I am still me, Marcus. I'm just me while pregnant, which means I'm more tired, more emotional, and yes, I need more support sometimes. But instead of adapting to that, you decided I was broken. That's not, he started to protest, then seemed to deflate. Maybe I haven't been as supportive as I should have been. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard from him in months, but it was too little, too late. Maybe. Okay, I know I haven't been supportive. I've been selfish and scared, and I took it out on you. But Emma, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work on communication. Marcus. I interrupted him gently but firmly. I'm 8.5 weeks pregnant. This is supposed to be one of the most exciting, magical times in our lives. Instead, I've spent the last month feeling like I have to apologize for existing. Do you understand how that feels? His eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry. Please don't leave. We can make this work. The tears in his eyes almost undid my resolve. Almost. But then I remembered sitting on the bathroom floor, cramping and scared, while he entertained another woman in our bedroom. I remembered Dr. Martinez's concerned face when she told me my stress levels were affecting the baby. I remembered the relief I'd felt when I called Jennifer Peterson, the sense of taking back control of my life. I've already signed a lease on a new apartment, I said quietly. It's a 2-bedroom place about 10 minutes from the clinic. Safe neighborhood, good schools nearby. You've already, Emma, when? You've only been gone for 4 days. I signed the lease this morning. I move in on Friday. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope. These are papers from my attorney. They outline custody arrangements and child support. Marcus stared at the envelope like it was a snake. You hired a lawyer? Jesus, Emma, you really are serious about this. I am. But Marcus, this doesn't have to be ugly. If you want to be part of this baby's life, really be part of it. Not just show up when it's convenient. Then we can work together. But I won't stay in a relationship where I'm constantly made to feel like I'm asking for too much just by existing. He took the envelope with shaking hands, but didn't open it. What if I change? What if I prove that I can be better? The question I'd been dreading, because part of me, the part that remembered lazy Sunday mornings and shared dreams, wanted to believe him. But I'd learned something important over the past few days. Sometimes loving someone means loving them enough to let them go. Marcus, even if you could change, and I hope you do, for your own sake, I can't go back to who I was in that relationship. I can't go back to walking on eggshells, wondering if my needs are too much, if my pregnancy is too inconvenient. I reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. I need to be strong for this baby. I need to be the kind of woman who models self-respect and healthy boundaries. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 3 years together settling between us like dust. Around us, the coffee shop continued its normal rhythm, people coming and going, conversations and laughter. The ordinary business of life continuing even as mine shifted completely. Will you let me be involved? Marcus asked finally, his voice small. With the baby, I mean. If you want to be involved, really involved, not just when it's convenient, then yes. But it has to be about the baby, Marcus. It can't be about trying to get back together or proving a point. It has to be about being a father. He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I do want that. I want to be a good father, even if I wasn't a good boyfriend. For the first time in months, I believed him. Not because I thought he would magically transform into someone different, but because admitting his failures was the first honest thing he'd said to me in a long time. Then we'll figure it out, I said. But we figure it out as co-parents, not as a couple trying to fix something that's already broken. When I left the coffee shop that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in months. The autumn air was crisp and clean, and Seattle's skyline looked like a promise instead of a prison. I was 26 years old, 8.5 weeks pregnant, and about to become a single mother. 6 months ago, that would have terrified me. Now it felt like freedom. That Friday, Helena helped me move into my new apartment, a bright, airy space with large windows and a small balcony overlooking a tree-lined street. As we unpacked boxes in what would become the nursery, I found myself imagining the life I would build here. Bedtime stories and first steps, birthday parties and school plays, all the ordinary magic of raising a child in a home filled with love and stability. You know what the best part is, Helena said, hanging up tiny clothes in the nursery closet. What's that? You're going to raise a baby who grows up knowing that their mother chose happiness over settling. That's a pretty powerful lesson. That night, I sat on my new couch in my new living room, my hand resting on my growing belly, and made a different kind of promise to my unborn child. Not just that they would grow up in a home without constant conflict, but that they would learn from watching me that it's never too late to choose yourself, to demand better, to build something beautiful from the ashes of what didn't work. 3 weeks later, Dr. Martinez confirmed that my stress levels had normalized and the cramping had completely stopped. My baby was growing strong and healthy, thriving in an environment free from constant tension and emotional turmoil. And so was I. Marcus kept his word about wanting to be involved. He attended prenatal appointments when invited, helped set up the nursery, and slowly began the work of becoming the father he wanted to be rather than the boyfriend he had been. It wasn't always easy old patterns die hard, but the structure of co-parenting seemed to bring out better instincts in both of us. As I write this, I'm 32 weeks pregnant, sitting in the nursery that overlooks a street where children play and families walk their dogs in the evening light. In 8 weeks, I'll hold my daughter in my arms and begin the greatest adventure of my life. But the real adventure started that day on the bathroom floor when I finally texted my lawyer and chose to save myself. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is decide that you deserve better and then have the courage to make it happen. My daughter will grow up in a home where love doesn't come with conditions, where asking for help isn't seen as weakness, and where her mother's happiness matters just as much as everyone else's. She'll learn that endings can be beginnings, that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what's not working to make room for what might. The bathroom floor was where I hit bottom, but it was also where I found the strength to rise.